Totally Football Show. Today, Champions League. From Arsenal looking another calibre against the likes of Alaba, apart from that error from Saliba. Borussia Barca and a Jurassic comeback as brave and doomed as when Dr. Ian Malcolm cloned Raptor DNA. We round all of that up, plus Villa's PSG thriller and a tempestuous Inter Bayern. We hear about Wednesday's other game, Newcastle's 5-0 thumping of Palace, and look ahead to round 33 of the Premier League. It's the Totally Football Show. Thursday, 17th of April. Woo! Hello, Liam Tharme.
Hello.
Or Liam, as you're more commonly known.
More commonly, yes.
Yeah, lovely to see you, Liam.
Obviously you do.
You're joined in the studio by Charlie Eccleshare.
Hello.
Fresh off the tennis beat.
And Madrid next week, actually.
Are you in Madrid next week?
Too
Is
late,
it?
yeah.
Is it tennis?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
All right. Some tennis scores this week on aggregate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Were there actually? No, there weren't quite.
Well, weren't there?
No.
Well, how about
no.
Arsenal beat Real Madrid 5-1?
5-1.
Is that a tennis score?
No, I mean, it's not a...
Well,
it's a
unweighted,
lead. It's a good lead.
It's
not
an
a set
abandoned
score.
tennis
Can you not win a set?
First set
5-1?
No, got to get to 6. So there was some, good...
Is this a new development?
About 150 years ago.
All right. Duncan.
Hi.
Hi. How was your midweek? Hey, this has been your favourite fortnight of the season, and it's over.
Yeah, quite sad actually. But also sated because it lived up to expectation.
Yeah, I say fortnight. 8 days between the two, or 9 maybe, between the two quarterfinal legs. And it is, I mean, it was fantastic last season. It was great this time around. I wonder, is it because you have 2 games on at the same time? And that's kind of the perfect amount. If you have last 16 and there's 4, then you're not really sure what's going on. 2's nice because if one's a bit of a dud.
Yeah, I mean, it's arguable in this day and age that you could have the 4 quarterfinals played at slightly different times so everyone could enjoy them.
I quite like having 2 at once.
Do you?
Yeah, I do as well. Though I did make the decision with the Villa game. I'm just going to focus on Villa PSG and not spread myself too thinly. I feel like it's often you can sort of lose out on both if you try and do too much.
Yeah. You guys were all watching Arsenal Wednesday night, I think. Liam, were you?
I wasn't.
Okay.
I caught the end of it.
Okay. So you missed out on the game of the midweek, which is very much Inter Bayern. The results anyway, Tuesday, 2 dead-looking ties were enlivened unexpectedly by bold but doomed comeback attempts. In Germany, a hat-trick from Jurassic saw Dortmund beating Barcelona 3-1, which was Barcelona's first defeat of this calendar year, but only enough to make it 3-5 in the Catalans' favour on aggregate. In Birmingham, meanwhile, on Tuesday, Villa, who were 3-1 down from the first leg, proceeded to let PSG go 2-0 up in this one, only to turn the game around and win it 3-2, which was, again, good, but not good enough to stop PSG going through 5-4 on aggregate. The Parisians will now face Arsenal, who are in the semi-finals for the first time in 16 years, having beaten the reigning European champions 5-1. 5-1. Barcelona, meanwhile, will play Inter, who drew 2-2 at San Siro in a thriller with Bayern. Harry Kane and Eric Dyer doing the scoring for Bayern Munich. But Inter going through. Also on Wednesday, Newcastle and Palace played their game in hand in the Premier League, and it was 5-0 to the Magpies, who climbed to 3rd now. We'll hear more about that and the Premier League later on. But what a satisfying Final Four we've got in the Champions League, Liam. We've got best team in France, best team in Spain, best team in Italy, and second best team in England.
Yeah, I quite like it as a mix. Obviously, PSG were at this stage last season, into finalists a couple of years ago. So it feels like you got a real nice, I think, balance there of teams that have done well or come close.
Right.
And obviously, it's probably just nicer, a bit different not having Real Madrid there. You feel like it's probably actually fairly evenly weighted across the
Yeah,
four.
you can make a case for any of them. Inter haven't, well, they won it in 2010.
Yeah.
Barca won it a decade ago.
2015, yeah. Lionel Messi's last
Of course.
European trophy.
And Arsenal and PSG have never won it. Who's your favourite, Charlie?
Yeah, I think it is a really hard one. I mean, I was thinking as well, no Liverpool or City, who obviously City being what they are now doesn't mean so much, but they are a team that in the last couple of years have got a bit of a Champions League aura. Obviously, Liverpool have the Anfield factor, no Real Madrid. To have none of those three does make it feel quite
It's quite
even.
FA Cup, isn't it? We've been saying all season how the FA Cup's turned into this sort of like, oh, it's a chance for someone to
Is
do
there
it.
a common theme behind that?
I think, and you can probably look at in the Premier League as well. I think, I think also the spreading of quality has happened across competitions, and we're maybe seeing the results of that. But it's exciting.
Why has quality got spread then? Are we getting into kind of
PSR and transfer
PSR,
stuff, and
a little bit, yeah.
Oh, nice.
But it is hard. I mean, also to have two teams meeting in the semi who've never won it before, in Arsenal and PSG, is pretty rare. And I imagine it is pretty rare not to have any of Liverpool, City, Real in the semis. But yeah, I think it's really hard to pick a favourite. I mean,
And they're all really different teams as well,
there's
aren't
one
they?
out. I mean, I know Barcelona, I think the bookie's favourite, but
Yeah.
Arsenal were the favourites with the Opta supercomputer.
Yeah, the supercomputer is interesting in the sense it's pretty much a four-way split. Arsenal on 28.7%, Inter on 25.5%, PSG on 24%, and Barcelona outside chance at the moment,
Good lord.
24.8%. Yeah.
And what do they base that then?
That's a simulation of the remaining games like 10,000 times. So, I
So
mean,
the computer goes away and plays the remaining games 10,000 times
yeah, in its head.
in its
It's
head.
computer skull. And then on 28.7% of those times, Arsenal came out on top. So, but the fact is they're all very close. So it is, there's no real strong favourite.
All right, let's get into what happened Tuesday, Wednesday, beginning with events at the Bernabeu. 5-1 against the reigning European champions, Arsenal reaching just their third Champions League semi-final ever and their first since 2009. I was watching the game at San Siro, but reports on this suggested it was a bit of an anticlimax because Real's mythical and much hyped remontada powers kind of never turned up.
Yeah, they certainly built that up before the game with even tweeting, didn't they? Translating 90 minutes is a long time in the Bernabeu into many languages.
It was if you were a Real Madrid fan.
Well, exactly. And theoretically, it's the same as anywhere else. It's not interstellar.
I don't know,
But,
actually. The theory would suggest that it's not the same as anywhere else. If you're near a black hole, of course, 90 minutes is many, many, many years.
Well, maybe Carlo Ancelotti wishes he was near a black hole after that outcome. I think it was incredibly tense, the first sort of half, particularly.
I think it always was because there was this we'd been told basically that you're
And
never.
we've seen it.
We've seen it, but the whole talk was you are never safe, and actually you're less safe if it's 0-0 with 2 minutes left because that's how they love it. They love these late comebacks. So there was kind of everything you'd been told was like, is it okay to not be nervous? And I was like, no, you should always be nervous. To the point the dark magic is such, maybe they'll play it now still and Real Madrid will somehow still win.
Right. Marca's headline on this Thursday morning was, I think, a fair summary. Just said, if you don't play, there are no miracles. And it was that the thing.
Yeah.
Real Madrid.
Yeah. Obviously, the first half was a tale of two penalties. Decisions that, if you think about it, the ref got both of them wrong in that he didn't award Arsenal's and VAR bravely said, go and have a look. And
Right.
he did, changed his mind. And then did award one to Real Madrid for Declan Rice hauling, in inverted commas, down Kylian Mbappe. But actually, it was just clever from Mbappe. And after a 90-minute VAR check, they overturned it.
Were you surprised that they overturned it, given the metric by which they'd given the first one?
I was really surprised. I have to say, the commentary team were all like, that's never a penalty. I was kind of like,
I've seen them give
I just thought, I sort of think that is insane. Or not that it should be, but once given,
Yeah.
I kind of feel like...
think-
Once you start reviewing footage of Declan with his hands and
He did have his hands
together,
there, but then I think he kind of releases just as Mbappe sort of falls down. And I think
Yeah.
I've never seen a more vociferous appeal than Declan
from
Rice. It
Declan
was
Rice.
about 3 minutes long.
He's very earnest.
and he does come across as quite an honest guy. And I think,
I mean, but I did like because afterwards he was like, he said to the ref, I would say if it was a penalty, and I think he genuinely believed that. He's an incredibly earnest guy.
like
And
when the good kid at school gets in trouble for something and they're like, look,
I would say.
I would.
Yeah.
I would.
But yeah, so I was a little bit surprised, I have to say, because certainly in the Premier League, even if you think that's a bit soft, once it's been given, they tend to sort of stick with
But
it.
I did think that was interesting, if it ever can be from a VAR point of view, in the sense that the VAR team clearly were telling the ref he was wrong, whereas I don't think that happened. We know that in the Premier League there's been examples of them kind of going, we don't want to make our mate on the pitch look bad. Whereas they were like, the first one's definitely a penalty. And you could tell that the ref didn't really want to overturn the Rice one. He took a long time to go, and he eventually did. And it was almost like, I'm in the Bernabeu, I'm taking a penalty off Real Madrid.
Big moment as well, because Rice would have been banned for the first leg of the
with that
semi-final.
yellow card. Okay. Were the moments of tension in this game that the moment after Saka managed not to convert the Arsenal penalty, and I guess by the time Real did get a goal, was it kind of too late then?
It was. I mean, that's the thing. There were no real kind of rational or objective moments of tension. It was all just in the context. Like if you were someone who hadn't listened or was somehow unaware of the Bernabeu aura, I think you would have been a little bit bored and just like, oh, well, this is a really well-organised defensive team against another team who are slinging crosses and they have a 3-goal lead. So even if they do give one away, they'll probably be fine. But so it was kind of, that's where the tension came from rather than any particular moments. I mean, and the fear that they've missed a penalty that might play in their head and slightly frazzle them. And I guess that played into even more of this is what happens at the Bernabeu, mad things happen, they've missed a penalty kind of thing.
But there's more ways to enjoy football games than simply, is there tension or not? I think seeing Real Madrid slowly lose their minds was equally entertaining. Like they were getting more and more tetchy. I mean, I was quite surprised there wasn't, some sort of mini meltdown towards the end. I mean, Rudiger did get quite aggressive at
He did get quite. He performed an interesting tactical role.
Yeah, he was a kind of like kid in the playground stealing dinner money mainly. That was his thing. But if you're listing Arsenal players that played well, it's pretty much everyone.
Was it?
I think obviously everyone's focused on Declan Rice, who was outstanding. Saka, doing a weird side Panenka, which I've never seen before, but then dinking it over Courtois to actually show that he can lift the ball. But I thought
Lewis
Skelly was great again.
Right.
But Kivior, everyone was worried about the absence of Gabriel going into this tie, both legs. And both legs, he looked a bit nervous the first 10 minutes of the first leg, but just looked absolutely tremendous.
It is worth saying as well with Kivior, I mean, he is probably the 4th choice left-sided centre-back for Arsenal after Gabriel, Calafiori and Tomiyasu. Like, he really is a long way down the pecking order. They're playing a striker in Mikel Merino, who again, who got 2 assists and was brilliant, who again, he's not even a striker. He wasn't even in that pecking order.
Right.
And he's up front, Kivior's at back against this great Real Madrid team. I just think it's a reminder again how well coached they are, and that's on Arteta.
If there was a defender making an error, it wasn't Kivior, it was
Saliba, yeah.
Saliba.
Very unlike him.
Is it?
Yeah, he just does, he's so cool, and he does that sort of thing so often, but never gives the ball away. He'll get it, sort of drop a shoulder, move away from a defender. It was potentially the perfect outcome, though, for Arsenal, because Real Madrid are interested in Saliba. Maybe that will sort of get him off the scent a little bit. So it was canny by Raya to give him that hospital pass and ensure maybe Real will look elsewhere.
Okay. Also through to a semi-final clash with PSG, who made it through on Tuesday, despite what Tim Spears dubbed the greatest Champions League comeback that never was. So nearly. The final 15 here with those saves from Donnarumma, Liam.
Yeah, that one off the Tielemans header especially was really good. There are a few moments where they looked a little bit open. You thought a PSG going to do probably the most ultimate PSG thing here, as I'd said to Duncan before the game. Ty's wrapped up. There's no need to worry. It's a different PSG now, and felt half proved right and half very much proved wrong. But I think it's really hard to go to Villa Park and for a whole 90 minutes completely control it. They were really good. I think perhaps about the first hour, and then obviously Villa could throw on their attacking talent. But that's a really good sign, I think, of the progress that they've made, even though they did, of course, concede goals in quick succession. And definitely. Because this is their 6th knockout game in the Champions League this season, because they had to play the playoff round. And that's the first time, really, that they've won ugly, if you like.
Yeah.
They've been so stylish in their other games and so aggressive and front-footed. And I think sometimes you need that maybe once, to get to the final, get to the semi-finals, you do need to pull that out of the bag.
Yeah, but I mean, the moment when, for example, John McGinn kind of barreled through the midfield, uncontested, looked totally unlike somebody playing PSG.
Well, it happened in the first leg when he got on the half turn. I think it was one of the only times any Villa midfielder got on the half turn, and 2 of the midfielders converged on him and fouled him, and that's been a big part of their game this season. Has been their pressing, and when teams do get through, they'll say, "We'll make the fouls." You're not getting through. And look, it was 2 really good finishes. I think both were deflected for the Villa goals. So there's probably another day where those don't go in. You could say the same for the 2 PSG goals. I think at Parc des Princes, so a mix of good finishing and some fortunate deflections. But yeah, that's a part of their game, I think, looking forward, and we'll touch on it. With regards to Arsenal, it's sort of two teams that can press really well as a star matchup. You go that'll be an interesting watch.
I also think what's really interesting about that PSG Arsenal matchup is PSG are this incredible counter-attacking team, whereas Arsenal's superpower is sort of stopping counter-attacks. That's where they really excel. So I guess it comes down to sort of which of those strengths wins out. But yeah, this was an interesting one as well, because I think when PSG were 2-0 up, there was a lot of kind of marveling at them and like they the favourites now.
Yeah. Well, it was just bizarre. How,
Yeah. Then the collapse has
Yeah.
sort of shifted that dial, I think, a little bit.
The game began in a really curious fashion with the PA mistakenly playing the Europa League anthem, after which confused Villa, who needed to recover a 2-goal
furious
deficit.
if I was one of the Villa players.
Right.
Wouldn't you? Like, the Champions League music is such like a
Yeah.
thing, and that's
They
what you've
played it
worked to get to.
afterwards. They segged into it. It was a mega mix. It was like Jive Bunny. It was fine. But yeah, it was an odd start.
But credit to Villa, I mean, they go out with their heads high because after going 2 goals down in a game in which they needed to turn around already a 2-goal deficit, they then came back and very, very nearly took it to extra time.
I think if they had, Asensio had that one-on-one that was well saved. There was the header that we talked about. I think if Villa had
a missed head where he didn't
Yeah.
even get to the
Yeah.
ball.
There's a big block at the end as well. With
big
Pacho.
block, yeah.
it feels like if Villa had got that extra goal, they probably would have gone on to win.
Right.
And I think it's quite interesting ahead of the semi-final that even Declan Rice in the post-match interview last night referenced that game. He was like, "We all watched the Villa game."
Right.
And although PSG obviously knocked out Liverpool, there was spells at Anfield where they were also under the ropes a little bit. So I do think it's quite important that the first leg is at the Emirates. I think if I was Mikel Arteta, I'd probably choose it that way around.
How come?
Why?
Just because I think Arsenal can get into a good position at home, a bit like they did against Real Madrid. And
No Thomas Partey for that first leg as well.
But I think that's probably less.
You'd
of an
rather,
issue
I
in
know.
the
I was
home
thinking
leg.
that you'd probably rather have that in a way for the home leg, though it's still a big blow, and that's probably the only that gives them a little bit of an edge, maybe.
On Tuesday's game, Chris Morrison asking why were only 3 minutes of time added
was
on
weird.
in the second half. So it's in total across the 2 halves 4 minutes of injury time for a game which featured 5 goals and 6 substitutions, which is kind of automatically 11 minutes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Subs are going to be 30 seconds, aren't they?
Oh, they okay.
Yeah.
Well, still.
Where does that come from? Because we all think it, but
No,
like,
it's just an
yeah,
exact.
yeah.
almost.
Yeah,
All right, that's
England
still
as
8
well.
minutes
yeah,
though.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it was odd. And again, Americans often baffled with how random additional time is in
Yeah.
football. It can,
Spun the roulette wheel, didn't they? And
Yeah.
sort of came out, yeah.
All right. PSG make it through to their 4th semi-final in 6 seasons. Julien Laurence pointing out that the 2 seasons that they didn't reach the Final Four were the ones in which they had Messi, Neymar and Mbappe as their front 3.
Can I say as well on Villa, like we hear a lot about how football's boring and everyone plays the same. I love watching Villa, and I tweeted like I'm really glad I don't support them because I don't think I could deal with the stress. Like the risks they take is kind of crazy, but it's also it makes it so good to watch. Like from the high line they play to the way they bait the press.
The way that they approached this game was a little bit too.
Yeah, maybe, but I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't want to say that because it
Sort
got
of
them reward
works,
as well.
Well, yeah, but it got them 2 goals down, from which ultimately they're.
But the first goal they let in was so silly that they started very well. The first 5-10 minutes, they were all over PSG.
It's the problem of if you want to go toe-to-toe with PSG, and I think that was Emery's big point. He said it kind of after the first leg was they were so kind of underdog in that first leg. Like Martinez, I think he played a couple goal kicks short, then immediately went long. The goal they got was completely against the run of play, and then kind of sat in their shell a bit. And then went, look, well, we're gonna go and play our way in the second leg. And then you say, well, you're then going to end up with a bunch of 1v1 matchups and players have to win duels, or you've got to defend the passes. There's maybe another day where Martinez holds that cut back and doesn't parry it out. But it's again part of the strength now of that PSG team is that the fullbacks on both sides, Hakimi was kind of the same way last season, but Nuno Mendes especially offer such a threat that now they don't have Mbappe, perhaps that star power, but they've got goals and quality from all over the pitch.
A lovely piece from you after last week's first leg. And chapeau for the headline on it. Behold the French press, the Wes Anderson homage. Well, it's a shame to lose Villa, but nice not to have an all-English semi-final, I'm just going to say. It's nice.
Well, I mean, Arsenal last time in the semis played Manchester United and got fairly comprehensively dealt with by Pete, Rooney and Ronaldo. So given their interest in Ollie Watkins in January, you can probably see how that might have gone.
Wednesday night, while Arsenal was snuffing out Real Madrid, there was Sturm and Drang at San Siro amidst a tempest. Inter and Bayern meeting for their second leg. And it was another classic. The drama, the passion, the volume of the fans at San Siro. It was Inter, who had won the first game 2-1 in Munich with just magnificent back-to-the-wall defending and 2 brilliant breakaway goals. This time around, got through with magnificent back-to-the-wall defending and 2 goals from corners, 2 in the space of 3 minutes, actually. Liam, you watched this. What did you think?
it felt a bit like vintage Inter at this point. The way in sort of both legs they scored in quick succession, and after conceding, really, really impressive. Again, almost a bit sort of Real Madrid like in that regard to come back. And even the goals that they did concede, they were so resolute at defending their box. It's sort of Kane out almost on the edge of the box, needing a shimmy and a shot across goal. I think Dyer was off the header was the back post off a short reworked corner. So they just don't give up sort of chances at all, really. And I think it makes them so consistent in the cups. It's the reason why domestically and now Champions League again, they're able, I think, season after season to succeed like this. And then doing the damage themselves through two very different corners. That the second one was lovely, sort of the crashing header.
Yeah. Well, there's been so many echoes of the Mourinho Inter of 2010, the treble-winning side, and this I thought was another one. Pavard very much bringing to mind Marco Materazzi.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and again, I think it's a pretty good example of the way that the kind of core of that team has probably largely stayed the same from sort of 2 seasons ago when they made the final.
Right.
There's been a few sort of changes you look at now.
One change might be key. Between the posts.
Yeah, I mean, people say that now looking at Onana as I know that actually. Ruben Amorim made this point when a journalist sort of very directly sort of had a go at him about his goalkeeper options, and he did say actually Onana showed Inter just how good he was in his distance kicking. It was phenomenal. I remember it in the final, I think, as well. He was particularly good, but Sommer is, I think, just on another level. He's so calm and composed. A lot of the time, sort of the middle centre back will sort of push up in the build up, and they'll have one other side. He'll play aggressively, and some of the patterns they work. I think it's even better now. They've got Thuram. I'm next to Lautaro.
He was excellent.
The way that they kind of alternate roles in terms of one sort of dropping in and can take it on their chest, or can take that ball and set it and then release the wing back. Because before, when they had sort of Dzeko or Lukaku there, seemed to be a little bit more structured as to they'd be the target man to play into. But Thuram and Lautaro are a really great combo.
Lautaro with the moment of the week, surely, when he, straight after Harry Kane had put Bayern ahead on the night, he stabbed in that kind of loose ball from a corner, and then mounted the advertising hoardings to roar at the 80,000 who were kind of roaring back at him, while one ultra kind of held up a banner of him doing the exact same thing behind him. What a lovely shot.
Yeah. I think it's 150 goals he's got
it
now.
Is.
And
that's captain, 5 straight Champions League matches in which he's scored in. Which is
to do it.
Is that right?
I think so.
I'm amazed that there's never more of a discussion about, when people we hear like striker links or clubs that are looking at players. I know he had a poor World Cup sort of a few years ago now, but consistently his numbers are ridiculous. Sort of technically, you look at the range of goals that he scores. I realise he's quite small, but I think his physical presence for someone of his size is phenomenal.
Low centre of gravity.
Yeah, and he steps up in the big games at Inter. I think always kind of has done, and that's hard to do over sort of season after season.
I think he's one of those players that rarely or often doesn't have a good game when people in England are watching him. So he's kind of filed under the Zlatan.
Yeah.
And that World Cup probably does have an outsized impact. But when Spurs, remember when City were going after Harry Kane in 2021 and Kane ended up staying, had he gone, Martinez was the guy they would have really wanted as a replacement. Whether Martinez would have gone, I don't know. But
talking to Spurs, if you'd said to a Spurs fan after the 2019 Champions League final that Harry Kane and Eric Dyer are going to score in a quarter-final, but guess who for? I mean, you'd probably got to Bayern eventually, but maybe not in your top 3 guesses.
Kane, who opens scoring on the night, levelling it up on aggregate. Then it was Martinez, then Pavard making it 2-1. On the night, they almost got it to 3-1 Inter, but Eric Dyer with that clever header, making the last 15 minutes a real siege as Bayern were just a goal away from forcing extra time. And what drama. Bayern go out. They won't be in their home final at the Allianz Arena. Thomas Müller potentially bowing out of the Champions League as a competition. We don't know where he's going to head. Interestingly, yesterday, Fiorentina confirming that they have made inquiries about whether Thomas Müller might like to go to Florence. I would love to see that.
That would be fun.
Müller, who looked good actually, starting in this game and making his 162nd Champions League appearance. I think he's 3rd now in the all-time appearances list. Anyway, Liam, do you think Inter can beat Barcelona?
I do. I think if anyone can, it'll be Inter. So it's going to be the best defence in the competition up against the best attack. So Barca have by far and away the most goals. I think if Barca play with a particularly sort of aggressive defensive line or quite high, Inter are a great team at getting in behind those, especially they've got sort of those wing backs that can really fly. Two strikers can be really hard to play against, and they can be so solid. I think there's that quality. They can double up out wide on the wingers, and just generally you see, as I mentioned, the goals that Bayern scored last night, even up against the quality they've got there. They're forced into sort of shots from awkward angles. They don't give up many sort of tap-ins. You can think about even the goal City got when they beat them in the final was a midfielder sort of crashing in, and their sort of defensive floor is really high, and Sommer's a top shot stopper as well. I know he's really there for his distribution, but he's really good there. So I think if anyone can, as we were mentioning, sort of with Arsenal PSG being a nice stylistic matchup, I think this is a similar one as well, where you go, there's real strengths that actually are going to clash, and that for me is just good fun.
Okay, it's coming up in what, the week after next, the first leg of the semi-final. Of course, when Inter did go through under Mourinho to win the Champions League 2010, they took on Barcelona in the final. Memorably beat them 3-1 in the first leg.
Thanks to the volcano.
Thank you, Duncan. What's the reason for that?
I can't remember the
name of that volcano.
Well, I can't remember the name of the volcano.
Yeah.
The big lad, I'm going to call it. But it was in Iceland, so
Yes.
not close to Milan. But it grounded in the days when grounding aeroplanes.
So it had
rare.
erupted about a month before, but the kind of cloud of ash cast a shadow over Barcelona's Champions League ambitions, to the extent that they took the decision, because flights were being grounded the whole time, they went, okay, we'll take a coach trip to Milan, which I think is about 1,000 kilometers. It took them about 14 hours. They stopped off in Cannes, I think, on the way for the night.
Some cans. For some cans.
Perhaps so, yeah.
Played like
And
that.
got canned. Barcelona this time around coming through 5-3 on aggregate against Borussia Dortmund. Tuesday, 4-0 up from the first leg. They probably thought it was all over. I think we all kind of did. Dortmund had other ideas, though. And when Szczesny took down Girassi for what became the opening goal, the penalty, you wondered maybe if Dortmund could make it happen. And then Girassi added a second. That was in the second half, and now it really began to look real for about 90 seconds until Barcelona forced an own goal themselves. And I think after that, even though it ended up 3-1, yeah.
But I do think as well, the two Tuesday night games kind of reinforce how well Arsenal did to make the comeback just never really seem on, because certainly in that Villa one, PSG had an even bigger lead, and yet it kind of felt almost inevitable. Once Villa got one, then the momentum was with them. And in this game as well, even though Barca came in with this huge lead, there was the feeling of comeback in the air. And when you do have a big lead, it's not like you're obviously huge favourites, but you can get a little bit caught as to what you're doing.
Right.
Are you just sitting back or complacent?
Yeah. I mean, credit to Girassi, who scored a hat-trick in this game, all three of the Dortmund goals. He's now on 13 Champions League goals for the campaign, 5 of which came against Barcelona. He didn't seem particularly pleased to receive his Man of the Match award, though. Much like Ousmane Dembele, somewhere out there's a man still trying to give Dembele his...
Was there a World Cup of Euros? Kai Havertz one as well?
Yeah.
Frowning.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's a good collection. I think there's a Twitter account for it now.
Girassi, perfect hat-trick as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, fair point. Can you do that if one's a penalty?
I think so.
Yeah?
Was it German hat-trick standards or not?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Because it wasn't in one half of football.
No, it's not that
Is
absurd
silly.
standard.
That is
And consecutive goals, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Cheapers.
I know.
Barcelona. So, yeah, complacency, a bit of fatigue, because I think this was their 6th game in 17 days. Or is this a sudden display of vulnerability when they get to the proper teams?
Potentially. I mean, I looked overall at the number of goals in Champions League quarterfinals going back on season. So at 30 in the legs this season, 32 last year. Then it goes back from 20 back to 23, 19 and 24, going back to, I skipped out 2019-20 when it was single leg nonsense. So it's just a massive jump in the past 2 years of sort of, is there, as we were saying before, just so much attacking talent everywhere? Are teams a bit more vulnerable defensively? Are they maybe being more aggressive? Yeah, definitely. I think that's all certainly sort of factoring in. I think a massive strength, and you look at Arsenal and you say, I think when I checked, they've still not conceded 3 goals or more in any game since December 2023. Since Luton. Of course they won that late on.
They won the game.
It was a great game.
It was also from next year about 0.7.
It was,
it was a freakish.
Right for that night.
He was, yeah.
He was. And just like amazing to have that consistency in that floor. And we're saying that you can look across the board, even teams like Inter, who we think are really sort of strong defensively, can have those lapses. Barca can have those lapses. So, who knows whether we're going to just overcorrect in the semi-finals now and have a bunch of 0-0s and everyone be really, really cagey. But I think it's a sort of trend we've seen in the Premier League recent years with goals records being broken. So it's interesting to see it spilling now into Europe.
The goals per game rate in the Champions League this season is almost what it was in the Premier League last season, 3.24 per game.
Wow,
so
that's too many.
That's insanely high.
It is.
I mean, a league average is generally around the kind of 2.5 to 2.8, no? I mean,
yeah, unless it's League and it's like 1.
Thumbs down.
Let's know why the Champions League was taking place on Wednesday night. In the Premier League, Newcastle and Crystal Palace were playing their game in hand. There to witness it at St James's Park was Chris Waugh.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning to you. Good morning to you. And it is a good morning on Tyneside. A game in hand successfully completed, a 5-0 win, achieved a 6th straight victory in a top 3 spot, now in Newcastle's hands with Arsenal within reach. Woof.
Yes, it's been quite the month or so for Newcastle United, obviously winning their first domestic trophy in 70 years. And then the big question after that was, would Newcastle settle for that? Would it be that things would tail off? They obviously had a big celebration on Tyneside. Several 100,000 people turned out. And it was will the players kick on again? Will they really look to secure that Champions League spot? And they've come back. They've won their next 4 league matches. Even an illness to Eddie Howe over the course of the last week. And Jason Tyndall, the assistant head coach, and Graham Jones, also another assistant, have had to step up, and Newcastle have gone and scored 9 goals in 4 days and in 2 very, very big wins at home. And really, they are now firm favourites to secure that Champions League spot. It would actually be a disappointment and from this stage and require quite the collapse for them not to secure one of those top 5 positions now.
The 2 teams in 6th and 7th, currently 5 points behind the Magpies. Well, none of us watched this game, Chris, so can you tell us what happened?
Well, Newcastle were dominant from early on. Isak actually had a bit of an off night in front of goal. He eventually scored, but he'd missed a couple of very good first half chances. And Newcastle took the lead from Jacob Murphy scored. And if anyone saw Sandro Tonali's goal, which he described against Brentford a couple of weeks ago as 70% cross, 30% shot, it was very similar to that, except slightly closer into the actual box rather than on the byline. From nowhere, really, though, scored. He insisted afterwards it's deliberate. And then, out of nowhere, Nick Pope rushed to the edge of his box, and after a lengthy VAR review, a penalty was given, which it probably was a penalty, but it was a stupidly long VAR review, one of those ones that just takes far longer than it needs to. And Eberechi Eze then stepped up and took a contender for worst penalty in the history of the Premier League. It was
I'm struggling to think of anything that could rival it.
Yeah, it was sort of like 3 different run-ups. He did a stutter, he did a little jog, he stopped, and then he just sort of passed the ball towards the goal. And Nick Pope had stood and just waited, and then just gratefully picked the ball up. And I think it was 98 seconds later, Newcastle countered, and Mark Gay scored his 2nd own goal of the season against Newcastle. Now, conspiracy theorists would suggest that maybe there's something in that, because Newcastle spent all of last summer trying to sign him. And yeah, from that point on, it was a case really of how many. They were 4-0 up by half-time, and then the second half was sort of less action-packed. Newcastle made quite a few substitutions. They've got another game on Saturday. They've used the same starting 11 in each of those 6 matches you mentioned, and they'll probably use the same one against Villa on Saturday, or largely the same, so it was a time to rest players. But yeah, absolutely dominant against a Palace side who, certainly away from home this season, have been very impressive, but they were dismantled on Tyneside.
Chris, can I just ask, this might be a sort of facile way of analysing it, but it feels like from the outside, Newcastle had a great season in, 22-23, then got into the Champions League and couldn't really cope with that and sort of fell away. Then this season, not being in Europe, have had another great season. How do they kind of manage to do both of those things simultaneously? So be in Europe, but not kind of fall apart? Like how much do you think they need to strengthen the squad to be able to compete like they couldn't last season?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge for them. And I think in hindsight, Newcastle missing out on Europe last year, They nearly got into the UEFA Conference League, but Man United winning the FA Cup prevented them. And actually, in hindsight, that's been to their benefit because they've had the focus of the league and obviously the League Cup, which they won. They've been able to largely play Saturday to Saturday or Sunday to Sunday rather than have the midweek games, and they've manage the injury situation well because of that. But going forward, they want to be in Europe and preferably the Champions League every season, and they need greater depth definitely to do that. They haven't made a signing which has strengthened the first 11 in each of the last 3 windows due to PSR. They definitely need to bring in 3 or 4 players as a minimum this summer to create that depth. But also some of the changes they've made behind the scenes was learning from last year. They knew that they had a lack of experience, not just in the playing staff, but really in the coaching squad, and even above that, really, backroom staff and executives hadn't been in Europe that much, and so they've brought in Paul Mitchell last summer as sporting director. He has a lot of experience in terms of this situation. Same with James Bunce, who came as the performance director. Theoretically, that's meant to improve the availability of players, the injury situation, and it certainly has done this year, but that's without the heightened pressure and games and intensity of the Champions League. So that is the challenge going forward, but I know that everyone at Newcastle as a session review, that's exactly what Eddie Howe does. He'll have learned from that, and that's the challenge going into next year, because they don't want to go out in the group stage of the Champions League again as they did last season.
Is Jacob Murphy one of the stories of the season, would you say, Chris? So maybe not just for Newcastle, but for the Premier League?
Very much so. I mean, since the start of December, only Mo Salah and Alexander Isak have been involved in more goals in the Premier League, which is quite the start. That's not just even over the course of 3 or 4 weeks. That's over 5 months now.
What's the change, do you think? Because he was a player who was notorious for his inconsistency previously.
Yeah, and I mean, he is still a player who, within a match, can exasperate because he can do something which you just think, why? How does a Premier League footballer do that? He pass the ball to the opposition, or he'll do something where you just think, why has he done that? But then he does actually have quality when he has confidence, certainly in terms of delivery. He's very good at getting early crosses in the box. He's built up a relationship with Alexander Isak, and Newcastle having that sort of right-sided right winger is actually a rarity nowadays. You don't have many. It's usually inverted wingers, and Newcastle try to get the ball to him quickly and get him to produce a lot of crosses, and some of them don't come off. But as he's grown in confidence, more and more of them are finding Alexander Isak or his teammates in the box. And then I think just as he's gained confidence, that's allowed him to take more shots from distance, or he feels like he can do that. And because Newcastle are putting him in the positions, he's really blossoming from it. Eddie Howe has fully put his faith in him. He's backed him as his number 1 this season on that right-hand side because it's a position Newcastle wanted to strengthen. And I think, again, it goes to the testament of the coaching of Eddie Howe, Jason Tindall and the rest of Newcastle's backroom staff that, yes, they have spent a heck of a lot of money post-takeover, but if you look at the side who was playing last night, a lot of the players were there inherited. Fabian Schär is still playing very well for Newcastle. Joe Linton is transformed. And Jacob Murphy is a prime example of that. He was sort of a bit of a laughingstock a few years ago. And at the moment, he's arguably the form right winger in the Premier League, even maybe ahead of Mo Salah, right in very current form.
Wow, big call. Well, we're speaking of big calls, is the talk on Tyneside now of second spot?
Yeah, they're very much looking to try and hunt down Arsenal. I mean, a few weeks ago, that would have seemed fanciful, but now, and nobody will be getting ahead of themselves, certainly inside Newcastle, but fans can dream and think of that because Newcastle still have to go to the Emirates. They play Arsenal, and although historically they've had a poor record there, they did go to the Emirates and win in the League Cup earlier this year. They've beaten Arsenal 3 times already this season, and just the way that they're playing at the moment, you wouldn't doubt that they could potentially do that. And I think that rather than worry about the teams behind them so much, they can start to think about how high can we actually finish here.
Good Lord. Eddie Howe, we now know that it's pneumonia that has hospitalised him. What's the latest on his health?
Yeah, so he went into hospital Friday night over the weekend, and he had a lot of tests, and obviously he is on the road to recovery. I think Newcastle are putting absolutely no pressure on him whatsoever. He's definitely not going to be in charge at Villa this weekend. He may potentially be back for Ipswich the following weekend, but there's no time frame on that yet. Newcastle are not going to push him. They're going to wait and see how his recovery goes. I mean, he'll be desperate to get back, but at the same time, he'll recognise that if he comes back too soon, then that could actually have a negative effect. So given how things are going at the moment, Jason Tindall and Graham Jones have a 100% record with 9-1 on aggregate, so I don't think there's necessarily any rush either. And it's nice that Newcastle have that position where, yes, they still haven't secured Champions League football, but they have a bit of a buffer now, and that maybe relieves the pressure a little bit on Howe as he recovers his strength.
Intriguingly, in their last 5 league games, Newcastle have scored 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and Wednesday night 5 goals, which if you're Villa facing them this weekend, you might be concerned to hear about. Chris, thank you so much. You got a pot on the Tyne out post the Crystal Palace game, have you?
We had one this week. We're going to have one early next week where we'll be reviewing both that and the Villa game.
Excellent. It's match day 33, listener, as you'll know if you've been keeping up. What could happen this weekend? Well, Liverpool can win the title and the relegation battle could be settled. Southampton already down. Leicester and Ipswich could join them depending on results over Saturday and Sunday. There's no early game on Saturday, by the way. You've got 4 games at 3. Brentford against Brighton, West Ham Saints, Palace Bournemouth, and Everton Man City. At 5:30, Aston Villa host Newcastle. Sunday at 2 o'clock, there's 3 matches. Man Utd Wolves, Fulham Chelsea, and Ipswich Arsenal. Should Ipswich win that, Liverpool can then seal the title when they take on Leicester at the King Power at 4:30 on Sunday, and Leicester will be relegated if they don't win that match against the league leaders. If you're hungry for some Spurs Nottingham and all that Nuno against his former club narrative, you have to wait until Monday evening. Boo. All right, well, top 5 race is largely the only thing left to care about. Newcastle now 3rd, as we heard, 4 points behind Arsenal. Behind them, Forest are 2 points back in 4th place now, and 2 points below them are Man City, and those are the top 5. In 6th and 7th, only a point behind City in the Champions League positions, are Chelsea and Villa. What should we be looking out for this weekend? Fulham, Chelsea?
Yeah, there's a real interesting mix of games this weekend because you've got a lot of teams who are close to each other, all within close proximity. We've got 3 teams all on 48 points, all sort of pushing for Europe. And Brighton play Brentford, for instance, who are right below them. So I think that's always a nice mix at this point in the season. Heard from Chris about obviously Newcastle playing Arsenal was a similar game later on, but I think that's nice now to have because you go, these are then the good tests of, which team will stand up when they need to.
Lib, you're going along to the GTEC for Brentford, Brighton.
So.
How confident are you that the Seagulls can shake off their worrying late season slump?
Fairly mixed. I think I really enjoy watching Brentford play as well, and they've been equally mixed. This season, I think Brentford have been a really interesting one for sort of strength of schedule, that they started the season on fire at home because they were playing weaker teams, struggled away, then that got flipped second half of the season. I'm watching recently in the game against Arsenal, and they were just a great example of a team that can sort of really defend deep when they need to, be stubborn and hard to break down, which has been, at times a real weakness of Brighton this season. Often they're better when teams come onto them, they can play through, they've got that pace out wide. So it will kind of be a case of, can Brighton get Brentford to play the game that Brighton want to play, and Brentford will obviously be trying to do the same. Right,
because Brentford look exactly the blueprint of team that Brighton don't like playing against.
But pretty much, I think that's probably because Brighton aspire to be a little bit more, maybe big six in their approach in terms of the possession, and definitely not as much as they were under De Zerbi. It's a little bit more like Graham Potter, but to use a Thomas Frankism, he always seems to like the word layers in his press conferences, and that's something we're seeing a bit more from Brentford this season.
What does he mean by layers?
So I guess when they first came in, they were a bit more defensive. They played a 5-3-2 or a 3-5-2 a lot more, and now it's more of a 4-3-3, having a bit more possession, being a bit more sort of territorial and dominant in games where opposition are either weaker or opposition don't want to be as controlling. So there's still times where you'll see them, switch shape or be a bit more pragmatic. But a lot of the time they can be sort of really dominant, and they've scored an awful lot of goals this season. At home especially, I think they've been really, really good. And I think if you add Viscera and Burma together, that's a 30 plus goals combined, which if that was one player doing it, people would be buying the one.
Wow.
I mean, if Thomas Frank likes layers so much, should we link the club with signing Kevin Lasagna this summer?
That's a great shout.
Just an option.
Are you, as a Brighton fan, are Brighton supporters happy with the season that you've had under Fabian Hutzler?
I obviously cannot speak for all of them, but I'll do my best. I think there's a slight generational shift in that younger fans who probably grew up with only ever knowing the Amex and Championship than Premier League football are probably a lot more expectant of sort of reaching European levels again, of being competitive, because they've presumably only ever known kind of that Premier League and that high level stuff. There's older fans, older generations that would have seen the club go through a lot harder times that are probably a lot more appreciative. I think it's somewhere in the middle. They're kind of averaging out to mid-table-ish this season, having been really good at the start, fell away for a bit, picked up again and were really, really good, and have then fallen away a bit.
I mean,
again.
they are the most schizoid team in the league. No,
Yeah.
you get beaten 7-0 by Forest, but equally you'll beat Man City. You'll do the double over. Well, you'll win twice at St James's Park.
Yeah.
Did the double over Man United?
They were like that under De Zerbi. I mean, I remember in the 22-23 season, there was this mad run where they'd win one, they'd lose one, and not just, win and lose, but win and lose heavily. I mean, they went on a run where, do you remember they beat United at home 1-0, they lost 5-1 at home to Everton the next game, then they beat Arsenal 3-0 away, then lost 4-1 at Newcastle, then beat Southampton 3-1. I mean, I guess that's the difference between a team like Brighton and the elite.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, it's not like, I don't know.
It does
there's
on the
not
back
that.
streets of Sussex.
Yeah.
No, they're in a sweet spot. They're doing just fine. It's a weird thing of like, how do you, I think, change your perceptions of what success looks like once you start achieving them? It's a club that have openly stated like top 10 consistent Premier League ambitions. Tony Bloom, chairman, was speaking earlier this season about sort of really hoping for a cup run because they were in a good position where they could commit to that in the league because they were doing okay in the league where it wasn't so much of a problem. And I think it's like they're fine. They're having really good periods and really bad periods, or not really bad, but not as good, and averaging out to be okay. But I suppose when they're seeing Newcastle or Villa, Bournemouth, other teams that are really sort of pushing it, and once you've got there and they've had the real luxury of going to Marseille, going to Ajax, going to AEK Athens, that I don't expect fans for one second to be like, oh, we're fine now with coming 8th, and you see the drop down of how many European places the Premier League's now going to get. It's you're in a very good window for it when Tottenham and Manchester United have fallen away. West Ham were a consistent European team for sort of 3 seasons that aren't there anymore. So it's definitely there, and you look at that chasing pack, how many of the teams, Brighton included, were Championship teams within the last sort of 5-6 years. Fulham, Bournemouth, Villa as well. It's definitely sort of that opportunity, but I think Hurst has done a really good job. I know that all the talk at the start of the season was his age, and that's kind of like been, I think, sort of cast aside now. But he's his first season managing a top 5 league team, and he's found a balance of his style and integrated well.
Right, it's hard for a young man in this business, to be taken seriously at first, but sooner or later, Liam, because I think yeah, very good. Ooh, Bournemouth, who are level on points with Brighton. Brighton currently lying 10th. Bournemouth in 8th spot, thanks to goal difference. Have played since the last round. If you missed this, they beat Fulham Monday night at the Vitality with a goal from Antoine Semenyo. After 53 seconds, the remaining 89 minutes and 7 seconds, I think, less worthy of comment. Is that a fair summary?
Aside from the mangled substitution
Oh, what
down to
happened?
Fulham, they brought on the wrong player.
Oh.
Because of a sort of administrative cock-up. It's just so officiating. This sort of thing drives you mad.
Why can't you just say,
Why,
sorry, that's the wrong...
why have that rule? Like, what? Basically, the rule
what's the
is
rule?
that once the player has set foot on the pitch,
yeah.
you can't then call him back.
That seems fair.
Even if it's clearly done in
favour
error.
of that.
They realised it straight away. It was like, nope, you can't do it. You can't
I
do
think
it.
that's...
But okay, well, and I know you're obviously just being provocative.
No, I'm not. How many steps onto the field should you be allowed to take? What's the
relative
margin?
to stride
I think if play hasn't restarted,
Okay,
what are they? I guess the question would be,
then
what are
with
they
teams
guarding
timeways,
against?
with teams timeways with
If you
that.
go to an airport and you go to the wrong departure gate, do they force you to go to that
Yes.
destination? No, you can go, this
should.
is Reykjavik, I'm going to Milan. Tricky for volcanoes, it's really. But
Yeah.
exactly, it's nonsense. It's a complete nonsense.
Same admin guys at Villa Park then presumably with the anthems as well.
They should have been forced to play that in the Europa League.
Yeah.
Fair.
It becomes a Europa League game if you play the anthem.
fair. Okay, so there you go. Well, that's what happened with Bournemouth, and that's nice because they hadn't had a win in ages.
Yes, Something
Yeah.
like 8 games.
Crikey. That's good for Fulham, of course, who will be facing Chelsea this time around.
At Stamford Bridge earlier this season.
They did, didn't they? 2-1. That was their first win at Stamford Bridge since 1979. Clearly, they've never done a league double over Chelsea. Could it happen this time around? Enzo Maresca's Chelsea outfit are in action on Thursday night. They're at home to Legia Warsaw, 3-0 up from the first leg, so fair chance that Maresca will rotate his team. The other top 5 contenders, well, we've heard about Newcastle and the form they're in. They're out Villa. Saturday at 5:30. I think that one is.
That's game of the
That should be
weekend.
great.
Is that game of the
Yeah,
weekend?
That's really exciting. And these two teams, they've kind of spanked each other in the last few years.
And we've said it before, but there's an underreported rivalry between them.
Oh, yeah?
They really dislike each other. There
Why?
was a time when they were both in a relegation clash, and I think Villa sent Newcastle down. And there's a lot of beef between them over the years.
2009, wasn't it?
Yeah. So even without the race for fifth place or top five, this would be quite a big game.
The
But
spanking does seem to have been very much a one way of late. Villa have lost 5 of the last 6 against Newcastle, including the last 3. So,
But the one they did win was indeed a spanking. I think it was only 3-0.
Oh, was it?
But Villa really took them apart a couple
Right.
of years ago.
whose bottom will be smarting come Saturday evening? Who knows? Listen, who knows? In other top 5 related fixtures, Man City, who are, you'll recall, just 1 point off missing out on Champions League football, will be away at Everton. Everton, this is only this is one of 3 home games remaining for them, Ipswich and Saints to come. So this should be quite an occasion, I think. What do you think, Liam?
Yeah, what a way for, send Goodison off with hopefully another nice compact David Moyes mid into low block, and Pep Guardiola increasingly being frustrated on the touchline. Just would feel very fitting.
Absolutely. City actually unbeaten in their last 16 meetings with the Toffees in all competitions, but that was a David Moyes-less Everton for many of those. In fact, all of them.
Yeah, because they used to be a real bogey team for City.
Did they?
Everton did, yeah. In the kind of early Abu Dhabi era, I remember Everton would go and win at the Etihad, seemingly
Well,
gay abandon.
Speaking to that point, to use the modern parlance, Pep's first ever visit, this will be his last visit to Goodison Park, but his first ever trip there, saw a 4-0 defeat for Manchester City in January 2017. Who was in charge of Everton in those days?
Ronald Koeman, it must have
Yeah,
been.
Ronald Koeman. Well done to you, because I didn't even remember he'd
that was
managed
sacked
there.
later
shortly
that year.
after he had red baubles on his Christmas tree, which upset the Everton fans, I remember. And that was peak Fraudiola era,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Because it was Pep's first season.
And it was also in the midst of the Claudio Bravo save drought,
Yes.
which is one of my favourite things that ever happened. He just
Yeah.
couldn't buy a save.
I was the man tracking that. And
Were
it was
you? Yeah.
a very exciting time in my life. Yeah.
Wow. Did you have a web page, days since has Claudio Bravo made a save?
5-0, yeah, on shots faced. But yeah, I mean, Pep's such a sort of Anglophile / Premier Leagueophile that I think he's going to make a big thing of A, David Moyes, and B, Goodison. I imagine
Top.
I imagine some very complimentary Goodison anecdotes or comments from Pep. Looking forward to it.
I look forward to that too. Ipswich Arsenal is the televised game from the Sunday 2:00 slot.
Yeah, we're living through the time lapse between TV picks and the title race fading.
yeah.
Like last weekend, we had City, Arsenal, and Liverpool all on telly. It's like, yeah, that could have been the
I
thing.
know.
Yeah.
I did think that it's weird for Liverpool, isn't it? I'm sure they don't care at all, but it's sort of like, does anyone really care about like they played West Ham last week? Well, obviously the fans will do, but I mean, it's not
This
like
game this weekend, the opposition's certainly going to care, because if Leicester don't win, they are mathematically relegated.
they're as down as you can possibly be. I mean,
Yeah.
Leicester fans are very upset with a number of things. So, yeah, it's going to be quite a strange atmosphere, I think, because you'll have angry Leicester fans and Liverpool fans who will, obviously, as Charlie says, be keen. But you're right, it has sort of just fizzled away in
no
the sort
one's
of background.
like they beat West Ham
gaps are
last
too
week,
big,
and
yeah.
it's sort of like, oh, okay.
It's going to happen. It's a case of when, not if.
There's no jeopardy, which is maybe the ideal way to win a
Lovely,
title.
huh?
I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
take away the stress.
Ipswich could also be relegated on Sunday if they don't win and West Ham and Wolves do. I think that's right. Or something along those lines. Wolves, who in other games potentially the weekend, are going to be away at Old Trafford, part of the also exciting race for 17th.
Wolves are flying, which is
They are,
against
yeah.
their
Yeah.
nature in many respects. But my dream scenario over the next few weeks is that Wolves and West Ham do continue to improve, and Spurs are on a plus 11 goal difference, but could come 17th, which
So
would be
the
a
highest
Currently,
difference.
West Ham are in that position after their defeat last weekend against Newcastle. The Wolves, meanwhile,
Flying.
flying.
Famously.
Wolves, meanwhile, could climb on their Wolverine wings above West Ham, Man United and Spurs by the end of the season. If you'd said to a Wolves fan at the start of this campaign you're going to finish above those teams, they'd have been booking their flights to Europe.
I like those questions because people always bring up, but like, if someone ever comes up to me and says it, I'm going to be like, hang on.
I will definitely believe it because these things only ever come to pass.
Yeah.
This random person coming up.
I've come from a time machine.
Wolves. It seems such an odd thing to make up. So yeah, I'm going to believe you.
Yeah.
Wow. Man United are in action Thursday night, hosting Lyon in the Europa League. Listen, you may have seen this game by the time you hear this. We believe that Andre Onana is going to be starting between the posts for United. And then presumably for the visit of Wolves, who also won the away game, their home fixture at Molineux. I was back on Boxing Day. Vitor Pereira was already in for that one, and it was a 2-0 win over his compatriot Ruben Amorim. The other game that's relevant to the 17th place rumble and also to the top 5 battle is Spurs and Nottingham Forest on Monday, which that should be fun as well.
Johnson Derby.
Yeah.
Nuno Derby.
Yeah. Nuno Derby.
Yeah, that should be fun.
I think Forest, you worry for them, don't you, at the moment? Because
you do, but that could be. Well, I mean, I say fun. If Spurs have gone out on Thursday, that is going to be a rancorous atmosphere.
Right.
Assuming anyone even turns up, I think a lot of people would probably boycott that game.
Spurs again in action Thursday night, 1-1 with Eintracht Frankfurt and playing away at Frankfurt. And people in the know don't rate Spurs' chances highly in a raucous atmosphere there in Frankfurt.
Yeah, I wonder about. I mean, I didn't think Frankfurt were great in the first seconds, but though obviously different in front of their raucous home fans, as you say. But I was maybe expecting a little bit more from Spurs. Really should have won that game. Maybe they'll now come to regret that. Yeah,
maybe they'll come through.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be amazed if they did. I mean,
the narrative gods are calling for a Manchester United Tottenham Europa League final. Wow. 16th v 17th, playing off for a place in the Champions League. It is kind of crazy, stuff.
Isn't it? That
oh my goodness,
that one of those two teams could be in the Champions League.
Oh
next
my
season.
Goodness,
that's what we want. It would be incredible. The tension and just.
So that scenario in which like 11 Premier League teams can get into the Champions League, if that
can't now happen because Villa needed to win the Champions League,
and it wasn't 11, I think it was 8.
No,
I think it was 11.
Was it 11?
Up to 11, but it needed Villa to finish outside the top 5 and win the Champions League.
Okay, so we got 5 definitely confirmed because of the UEFA coefficient, and then those aren't impacted by United or Spurs hypothetically getting through from the Europa League.
Yeah. No, there wouldn't be a sort of 2012 Chelsea booting out Spurs by the Champions League situation.
Yeah,
but it is kind of mad. I mean, that you could have one of those two teams who's had such a dreadful league season getting into the Champions League.
Because they've had a good cup run and thus deserved it. Excellent.
It's very community chess, isn't it? It's very like, we got a place in the Champions League. Yeah, nice.
Excellent. All right, well, those are some games that are happening this weekend, and we will be getting together on Sunday night to discuss all of them, with the exception of Spurs Nottingham Forest, which take place on Monday. For now, many, many thanks to Chris Waugh for joining us earlier on, to Liam and Duncan and Charlie, and Jake, who's been putting this together for our YouTube channel, at The Totally Football Show, I think. Some combination of those components. Producer Charlie as well, and the most important person, you listener. Sunday night, Monday morning, we're here if you fancy a bit of that. For now, from all of us here, it's goodbye. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.